Hello everyone, and welcome back to Ben Talks About. Now, despite the fact that we are now near the end of November, we still have a bit of unfinished business with the Halloween project I started last month, as we still have 2 more volumes of the Death Note manga series to take a look at. And today we're going to be focusing on the 5th volume. Now, unfortunately for us, this is the part of the story where a majority of the Death Note fanbase can agree where the story sort of started to spiral downhill. Now, while I can partially agree on that, there are a couple of things in the manga that I think are good ideas on paper, but depending on who you ask, the execution of it wasn't particularly the greatest. So, the main story starts off where the previous volume ended with Light, Misa, and Light's father being in confinement on the assumption that Light and Misa are the 2 Kiras. Now, Misa has already given up her memories of the Death Note, so at this point she has no idea what L is talking about, but Light, on the other hand, decides to do so in this volume. And as a result, Ryuk goes away, and Light's memories of being Kira and using the Death Note are completely gone. So, the rest of the volume pretty much involves the rest of the task force, alongside Light and L, of course, trying to figure out who the real Kira is, as sometime after Light was confined, the Kira killings, you could say, begin to return once again. So, of course, we as the audience know that someone else has gotten hold of the Death Note, and that particular person is involved with a major company in this series called Yotsuba. And pretty much what they do is that there are 8 members of the company that hold these special meetings trying to figure out which one of them could be Kira and what sort of people they should have be put to death. Now, despite the fact that these characters aren't exactly as interesting as Light being Kira, in my personal opinion, it is sort of clever how they made this sort of a parallel to an assumption that L made in one of the previous volumes, as he once said that if Kira was indeed a fully grown adult, they would have used the Death Note for their own sort of maniacal and personal nefarious purposes, which is pretty much directly described in this volume, as the Yotsuba company are pretty much trying to get rid of people who would end up harming their company, as they are a huge corporation and, they gotta make the bucks. Now, it is definitely a sort of interesting and clever idea, and anyway, one other part of the volume that sort of gets really highlighted, I guess you could say, is Misa's rather infamous sort of personality in the series, as this is where she begins to act sort of more annoying and is doing a really, really terrible job at convincing the task force that she isn't the second Kira, as she eventually states that if it turned out that Light was Kira, she would not care because Kira was the one who sort of avenged the death of Misa's parents. And not only that, but the task force is also pretty much clear that she was the one who sent those tapes over to that huge building in one of the previous volumes where, she was playing the role of the second Kira. But luckily she doesn't do a whole lot in this volume, and she's not as one of the major focuses. Whenever that sort of happens, the volume is more focusing on the relationship between Light and L, as this is a sort of quote-unquote reformed version of Light. He no longer believes that he is adult Kira, but L is still determined to figure out that to try and convince them that he really is. And this is sort of a rather interesting idea on paper, once again, as, we get to see Light in a sort of different, I guess you could say, as you could say, light, no pun intended there, on how he would have acted if he really wasn't Kira. But it can sort of not really make sense if you think about it, because it was indeed Light's choice to use the Death Note for the purpose of trying to make the world a greater place. That's why he was, started out by killing off all, like, criminals and all that. So when you have this version of Light who is under the assumption that, he would not use that sort of power to kill at all, despite the fact that that was something that was, his choice at the beginning of the series, it sort of contradicts how Light acted before he got the Death Note, but it is still rather interesting to think about. As for the character of L, he doesn't necessarily change a whole lot. He starts off the volume very, as he says, depressed, because, he spent all this time getting all of this evidence, and now realizing that he may have been wrong at here, it gives him, it makes him depressed, because he feels like they might have to just redo the entire case from scratch in order to find out who the real Kira is, despite the fact that that Light came close to being caught in the previous volume. And another sort of idea that they have is, considering that when he was in confinement, Light was, acting very reserved and sort of quiet at the beginning, but here, after he gets his memories lost, he's just like, screaming to L, like, he can't be the real Kira, they have to catch him right now, they have to let him out. The rest of the task force is rather perplexed as this entire moment sort of comes out of left field. And this, alongside, the idea of, them still determining that Misa was the second Kira, they go under the assumption that there's a possibility that Kira is or more accurately, the Kira's powers are something that can be passed on from person to person, so if Kira is caught, another person can just take Kira's place. And, as the Yotsuba company is starting to do Kira's killings now, L sort of thinks that there might not be any real point to trying to catch Kira, because every time they try to catch him, there's a possibility that, his powers could be passed on to someone else and the killings can still happen. But Light does indeed slap L out of it, and he begins to act more and more like the actual L that we've come to know. So yeah, their relationship and all that is given a new spin in this volume, and I can sort of appreciate that. And what I can really appreciate this volume for is what they do with some of the side characters, I guess you could say. More specifically, the comic relief character of the task force named Matsuda, who, in the second to last chapter in the volume, is investigating the Yotsuba Corporation on his own, as I'm guessing he sort of feels like he's being left out of everything, and, he's sort of just like a joke to the rest of the task force, especially to L. So eventually he finds himself being caught by the Yotsuba company, and so the rest of the task force has to try and work together to not only hide Matsuda's identity as a member of the task force, but they also have to make sure that when they have him escape, he won't be sort of suspected of being like a spy by Yotsuba. So they try to do this by planning Matsuda to sort of fake his own death so that, Yotsuba won't be trying to track them. Which, this entire area is probably my favorite part of the volume, as it gives a side character that was really only a majority of the time in the background. It allows them to get more, of the spotlight. And I sort of wish that the series had more moments like this, where characters beside, Light, Al, Misa, and maybe on occasion Light's father get some time in the spotlight, because they are important characters as they're members of the task force and are trying to help rid the world from this person who has this power to kill almost anyone that he knows the name and face to. But yeah, while I can't agree that the story itself isn't really as interesting as it was in the previous volumes, I still had quite a bit of fun reading a couple parts of the fifth volume of the Death Note manga series. And if you have seen this before and you begin to lose interest in the series after reading it, I don't necessarily blame you, but if you give it a second read, maybe you can come to appreciate a couple of the sort of things that it departs from the rest of the series and, all that kind of stuff. So, I hope you all enjoyed these videos that are a return to Jasper Cat Productions, and I will be trying my best to get some videos out every at least Monday and Friday. This video would have been uploaded on Friday, but I wasn't exactly done with getting all the notes for what I had to say about this volume. But the next video I will try to get on by Friday. So I'll see you all next time when we take our final look at the Death Note manga series with Volume 6. Until then, I am Ben Contreras, and